Welcome to Zero Shot, the AI podcast without the hype. I'm Llew Jury, the MD of Advancer, and as always, I'm joined by my good mate, James Gauci, the CEO of Cadent. G'day, James.
G'day, Llew. How's it going, mate?
Very well. Great to be here. It's our 10th episode, James.
Episode 10. Again, I'm just continually surprised by the pace at which we seem to be releasing episodes.
The velocity, the learning velocity, I heard, James. It's all about the learning velocity in this AI world. And to the listeners, if you're joining us for the first time in the show, what we do here at Zero Shot is cut through the noise to bring you the technical and business realities of how AI is transforming your business and the entire business landscape. So we're projecting ahead in 2026 as we look into all of the concepts and understands all of the strategic shifts in the AI industry, and especially how to position your organization for maximum competitive advantage for what's coming. So today, James, we've got a huge topic. What are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to explore the idea of robotics and spatial AI, physical AI. There are a couple of kind of buzzwords that are being thrown around about these schools of thought at the moment. But whether you're a long-time listener or whether you've just found us today, we're going to be really diving deep into what it means for businesses, because I think we all know how great it would be to have bot cleaning our dishes, but it's something completely different for a robot to be doing physical work and potentially augmenting the work of other humans in the workplace and potentially even displacing the work of other humans in the workplace. So yeah, it's worth talking about, not just from the opportunities perspective, but also from some of the challenge, like from the perspective of some of the challenges that we're going to encounter over the next kind of 5 to 10 years in this zone, if what people like Jensen Huang is saying is to be believed. That's pretty revolutionary.
It's going to be really interesting, isn't it? And it's something that James and I have been watching from afar, and it's coming in a rate of knots. And this is why we thought we'd do a special episode 10, talk about robotics and how it fits into the world of AI and everything we're seeing. So before we get on to the first topic of, I suppose, the state of play, James, do you want to give a shout out to our new sponsor?
Yes, we've got 2 new sponsors today, and they'll be somewhat familiar to many people in our audience. I want to give a shout out to Advancer, the AI agency. And if you're tired of the AI hype and you just want real, measurable results, these are the people that you need to talk to, because they work directly with leadership teams to identify high impact use cases, and then they build out the custom tools and processes to support them, whether that's an internal chatbot or a voice AI system or even a full-scale process automation. And there's a guy I know by the name of Llew Jury, who's the managing director of Advancer, and I'm sure he'd be very, very pleased to take your call, and he's one of the best in the business. Llew.
Thank you. Yeah, what a shout-out. Wow. I owe you one for later in the pod, mate.
Just buy me a beer on Friday.
I will. It's that was a great shout out, but thank you very much. And look, moving straight into our state of play, and I suppose, James, what we want to do is really get into, I suppose, instead of going down the tool of the week and what we're seeing as relevant and new, this is all relevant and new, right? And we want to actually sort of frame this whole conversation around what we're seeing in the market, what we're seeing actually locally on the ground. I think a lot of robotics and spatial AI conversations, they come in from news feeds, and they come in on Twitter, and they come in on, through the social media influencers and things like that, with sort of AI looking robotic images on, Instagram tiles and all of this sort of thing, don't they? But James, what's happening on the ground? What's going on in the world of AI, and specifically around the community that you're seeing in terms of the robotics community, the AI community in general? What's happening in Australia and beyond that you're seeing?
Robotics is an interesting kind of subset of what we'd call, autonomous and intelligent systems in an academic sense, and robotics is probably the one that's been around for the longest. These are kind of mechanical systems that automate processes that are often programmed, whether digitally or otherwise. And so huge legacy there that it's easy to forget about. But where things have gone over the last 20 years, especially, is autonomous systems, things like physical autonomous systems like self-driving cars, robotic process automation within kind of, for example, advanced manufacturing. That was very much its own school of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And what's been happening over the last kind of 10 to 15 years is the rise of machine learning as a technology, which has led to the generative AIs that we're now seeing propagating throughout society. So the Geminis and the ChatGPTs and so on. And so what we're starting to see now is that these two communities who have been functionally somewhat disconnected from one another.
Yeah. Far apart, right?
Yeah.
They've sort of lived in their own worlds.
They're now coming back together in a few major ways. And the first way that they started to come back together was when the regulators started to talk about, okay, what are we going to do about machine learning systems and autonomous systems and the ethics and governance and so on of those systems. When generative AI started to really take off, those same ways of thinking about the positive and negative impacts of those kinds of systems were then overlaid onto these generative AI systems. So all of the lessons that we learned in kind of autonomous vehicles, autonomous weapons systems, manufacturing and high-risk environments, all of a sudden those ways of thinking are relevant to, everyday people. And this is like, who's accountable when the system goes wrong? Do people know that they're using an autonomous system or a robotic system or an AI system?
And all the privacy concerns that go with that, all the PII and, all the obligations we have, right?
Exactly. And so now what we're seeing is that these worlds are crashing back together in a technical sense, not just in the kind of ways of thinking about it sense, the theory land. It's now like, okay, how can we use generative AI and machine learning techniques to apply them in robotics circumstances? And that's what, DARPA's been doing for a long time. It's what Nvidia's now been doing for a long time. And it's starting to change the way that we think about, for example, artificial general intelligence, which we might touch on to different points in our conversation today.
Yeah. And the other one that springs to mind is things like the Elon Musks of the world with their Groks and the AI that powers the generative, the GPTs that we use and the Groks. And they talk about 1 million GPUs, being used to train up Grok and things like that. But then in the next breath, he says, actually, we're using the same AI, if you like, beside Maximus and the humanoid robot projects that he's got. And he's sort of joined those in the last sort of 6 months at the hip, haven't they? And they've really come together. What about what you're seeing on the ground? Is there still an AI community over here in Australia that really looks at, their world from a different lens? And there's a robotics community. I mean, there's places like, for example, in Brisbane, Arm Hub in Northgate, which does a lot of the sort of the hardware and the robotic sort of side of things and the farming and all that sort of world, but they're disconnected to the GPT builders maybe in different parts, and that seems to be the same in Sydney and Melbourne and those sort of places.
It's almost like they're different use cases that used to have different technologies powering them, but increasingly they're similar technologies and certainly similar hardware that are powering the systems. And so what I'm seeing is people are coming together because of that shared interest, but they're all coming from different backgrounds, like generative AI people, machine learning people. Often they're from social science backgrounds, strangely enough, where they learn a lot about statistics and learn a lot about propensity models, multiple regression analysis, and all that stuff that's great for LLMs and so on, and neural nets. Whereas on the other hand, you've got people who've come from mechatronics and electrical engineering and things. And those are far more deterministic systems. They're not the probabilistic systems that we're dealing with now. And so there's a strong overlap happening. It's just a question of how quickly that's going to happen and how effectively that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. What about with the state of play internationally, James? We've been talking, you and I, a bit off camera about the dancing that they do, 12 months ago in China, and now the dancing robots in 2026, and the differences there. And both of us are a little bit skeptical, right? When we talked about this, about are there people at the back, with sort of Xbox joysticks and things like that, controlling one arm each and things like that? Where do you think we're up to with robotic demos? And I mean, China is eating a lot of people's lunch, right? A lot of countries, a lot of sovereign states' lunch. They're really going after the model side with all their open source, the DeepSeeks and the Kimis and the Quens and all that world, as we've talked on other pods. But where do you think they're truly up to? Because everybody else is playing a bit of catch up, right?
Yeah, it's funny because like my take on all of that is based around when Elon Musk and Tesla, they brought out the new kind of humanoid robot that they were developing, and then they had a number of them at the kind of announcement event walking around in the space and what have you. And it was like journalists did their job and were like, this is people in the back room with controllers and like saying the things. And like, it was too real to be AI, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, that has kind of since colored my skepticism of when we see large scale demonstrations of these kinds of systems, like you referenced the Chinese one the other day, where they had, what was it, about 25 robots on stage doing a choreographed dance and stuff.
And was it with swords? They were with spears and swords
and all sorts of fun stuff, and they were like choreographed with people as well, and
interspersed with humans.
There were a couple of jokes in there, like that they had, where one of the robots failed and it looked like it failed, and everybody went to go and kind of move it, but then it came back to life and did something kind of fun. It's like, it's nice, but it is innovation theater. And
yeah, good call. Yeah.
And I think what I would love to learn as a result of this session with you today, Llew, is like where the rubber is going to start hitting the road. Because innovation theatre is fun, and a lot of people make a lot of money out of innovation theatre, and share prices are largely affected by it. But when it comes to, real world, real businesses, people making decisions, it makes me wonder, where are we starting to connect those dots? We've talked about digital twins for a long time, which are like digital models of physical systems. We've talked about automation, like we talk about automation of processes and so on in the physical world. When do they start to talk to one another and actually start to make decisions for themselves or solve novel problems on our behalf? Have you seen recently, Llew, any strong examples of that yet? Because I struggle to think of anything outside of kind of high-end advanced manufacturing where that's already started to happen.
Yeah, and agreed. Like, let's go to the top. There's a lot of money being invested by the Amazons of the world with the robotics in warehousing and things like that, to the detriment of recently 16,000 people being, released from Amazon, and, little bit of that AI greenwashing or AI washing. It's not greenwashing, AI washing coming in and sort of going, well, we're using AI as the reason why this is, taking place. And I think that digital twins, over the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of companies in the venture capital space pitching to us about digital twins. And, in the last probably 12 to 18 months, AI digital twins, they've sort of pivoted. The digital twin guys have pivoted in the last couple of years to, we're gonna mimic what's going on in the real world with this sort of physical world, and sort of it's all wrapped into one. A lot of it doesn't get funded, James. That's the first port of call. So
why is that? Why do they not get funded?
Innovation theatre, as you said. I love that term. Innovation theatre. It transcends everything we're talking about here today, and it transcends the hardware piece. It transcends the digital twin piece in the AI, and I'm sure there's great examples of digital twins in engineering and property development, and let's call it just solid industries that have already been using digital twins for 10 to 15 years. And also airlines, I've seen some great products and businesses in that.
Mining and resources sector as well.
Mining and resources.
Making huge money out of predictive maintenance and autonomous systems. And yeah, it's wild.
100%. Brilliant in that. And that's, let's call it level one. That's sort of the foundation level. But where it hasn't actually converted is actually in the AI space, where it's more into that metaverse type play, but in digital twins generally are in the business world, right? That's our experience. We're seeing them in that space. Now, Meta came out the other day from their metaverse and said that they're actually not proceeding with it. And I think they spent 80 billion US on it, James. And they've decided to sort of wind it down. But then I think they came out and said they actually going to keep it going in some form or function. But they actually changed their name, James, to Meta. And so, would you change your whole business of Cadent or Advancer to digital twin? It's a bit like that. I think some people get a little bit, there's a bit of innovation theatre around some particular verticals within the world that we live in. And I come back to the first point. You've got the hardware piece and mimicking the hardware piece. You've got the AGI, the artificial general intelligence piece, and everybody wants to know what's coming next with that. So they're trying to, maybe use their own digital twins, and probably at Anthropic and all the frontiers, they're probably doing that, right? And they're using AI to sort of see what comes next. But I think it hasn't reached our world of business and our world of everybody listening to this podcast. That's not to say it won't. James, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of hard blockers to success with this, and the technical aspects are a big one. I mean, I think it's best illustrated by, speaking of Meta, their former AI boss, Jan LeCun, who, led the development of the llama models and so on, and got to a certain point. And his excuse for leaving Meta about 12 months ago at this point was he was of the opinion that LLMs are done. Like, we've reached the end of what LLMs can do now. So I'm going to go
12 months ago.
Yeah.
12 months ago, yeah.
And, whether he's right or wrong remains to be seen. But like the reason why he left and the thing that he was moving on to was something called world models. And this is a really interesting area, which a lot of people believe is a precursor, like a requirement for artificial general intelligence to be reached, because they want the one model to rule them all. Right? Like that's the whole idea of AGI. It's like the one model that's better than every person in the world at everything. And that includes using a physical corporeal form to affect the physical world. Hence,
wow. You're going to need to explain that.
Like,
unpack that one.
So they want to put this model into a robotic body. That's why we're seeing so many humanoid robots floating around. They want to put that model in there, and they just want it to act like a human. That's what they want. And they want it to be better than humans at everything, because whoever gets to that point is the Henry Ford of the 2000s, 21st century. And that means you're only limited by the resources that you have as to how big your workforce can become, and they can work 24 hours a day, and they're smarter than all of the humans on the planet. This is what is being aimed for with world models, right? And AGI, which is kind of scary and seems outlandish, but these are the kinds of conversations they have in Silicon Valley, right? It's another world. But world models are important for robotics because the current hypothesis of the investors who are working hard in this space, and the technologists that are working hard in this space, is that's what they want to achieve. They want to have these synthetic people rolling around doing work for them, and I think we're a fair way off that from a technical perspective, but also from a regulatory perspective, because that'll be kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back when it comes to things like workplace relations laws and things like that. There are going to be a lot of pretty upset people in every economy around the world if all of a sudden a $10,000 robot can do the work of 5 people in the same day. And at a higher level of quality, right?
I think it's something we're going to have to get used to, because I actually think that will actually happen. It's how we then transition from now to that. I mean, back to your point about regulation, James, around probably hardware. If we're talking about hardware here, the self-driving cars, and there seems to be this grey ground where even 3 to 4 years ago, you weren't allowed to have a self-driving car in Australia. And because it was blamed on the white lines on the roads. Remember that?
Yeah.
The LiDAR or whatever couldn't actually see it properly, so therefore it was sort of banned. My understanding now is it's open slather. You can pay $400 for your Tesla and fully self-driven. I was self-driven home the other night in a Model Y from, in my Uber. And the guy literally from the valley to my house didn't touch the steering wheel and took me through the whole thing. Now, of course, we've got Waymo in the US and doing literally millions of rides. We've now talked through that real hardware regulation piece, because it goes into that digital twin world. That feels like 2 to 3 years where we've gone from you're not allowed to have self-driving cars in Australia, but actually the guy drove me home the other night. Well, the car drove me home.
Yeah, there's kind of a tipping point that happens when enough people have the capability to do something that the public outcry kind of starts affecting the opinions of other people have of politicians and things like that, which has a tendency to get them moving on particular rules and regulations and stuff. I mean, take a look at AI regulation in this country in the opposite direction. Like there hasn't been any specific AI regulation. There was a big cry for it over an extended period of time. And then it kind of fizzed over the course of the last kind of 12, 18 months. And there are a lot of people who are really upset about that. And they're not upset from the perspective, like there are people who are upset from the perspective of like, I want AI to be regulated because I'm kind of fearful of what might happen if these systems kind of roam around unchecked, similar to like the way that a self-driving car might. But the businesses in that situation, they want the regulation so they have regulatory certainty, so that regulation doesn't become a risk for them. That the government's kind of basically signed a contract with them to say these are the rules of the road for AI. So it's interesting that those two areas are kind of going in separate directions, or maybe they're coming closer together. I'm not sure, but
We'll wait and
it's
see.
interesting times, yeah, for sure.
It is. Before we move on, quickly about the Nvidia hardware side of things, James, you've been following this pretty closely, and Jensen Huang, and what you sort of talked about last week and all that. Well, do you want to give listeners just a quick 60 seconds on what he said and where he is taking Nvidia?
Yeah, they're trying to muscle into the models space. Like they don't want to just be the hardware company. They want to be the vertically integrated AI company, and that includes robotics. And so they're developing their GROOT model, which is a foundational model for robots. Because they have access to all of that compute hardware, they can train their robotic systems in virtual worlds and create neural nets for physical activity and pick up this bowl and move that brick or what have you. And they're now being able to generalize that performance a lot more broadly than they did before because of the latest generation of AI chips. But interestingly, they're now starting to talk about world models. And so they've released their own world model.
As you do.
Yeah, and like this is kind of the reason why this is lofty and a holy grail kind of pursuit is because they're trying to create essentially a probabilistic model of the whole world so that an automated system can perceive of and react to the whole world, so vision and sound and space and time and etc. So it's easy to get esoteric there. The upshot is basically that they now have the chips to run the models in battery-powered, two-legged, two-armed machines that are beginning to do generalizable tasks. That's the real headline here. And that may present a pretty big opportunity for smaller businesses who may need a C3PO in their lives, or larger businesses who do generalist kind of work as part of their service delivery.
And we're going to talk about this next, but were they sort of in the home or were they in the business, James? Because I did see some things about doing, they're sort of focused on doing the dishes or emptying the washing machine for you or sort of doing all those mundane tasks. Or are they, like you said a few minutes ago, going to be doing and replacing the work of 5 people? What's coming?
I don't know yet. I think that you're probably better positioned than me to kind of answer this question, because when I think about it, in my role, I don't deal with a lot of physical systems a lot of the time, but I know that over the course of your career, Llew, it's been working with a lot of different industries over a long period of time, both from the business to consumer perspective and the business to business perspective. Do you think it's going to come from is most of the demand going to come from the consumer side where they don't want to do the dishes anymore or whatever? And what are the similar use cases there versus are we going to see physical AI in our workplaces, and when, but for what reasons other than the stuff that we're already seeing like logistics and inventory management and things like that? Where do you think the cards are going to fall?
Well, I think they've already fallen, James. I think the cards have fallen towards the business side rather than the consumer. So what I mean by that, it's a bit like e-commerce or search marketing or digital marketing. It's kind of easier and cheaper and faster to talk to a board and go and do a technology and some innovation in a business environment than it is to have a conversation with the consumer or market to the consumer and, get in line with a number of other providers to then offer a consumer a product or a service. So I think that it's already been happening. And I've been watching it both from my world in the tech game for many, many years and the digital marketing game, but also as a venture capital investor. And what I've been seeing is that there's already been a lot of robotics in play within specific industries that you would never have any idea that they're already playing. We hear stories, of course, about the Amazons, as I said before, and the whole automation of warehousing. and the logistics. And of course, everybody knows the automotive game with all the arms and all those changes that have gone on from that manufacturing, the just-in-time manufacturing sort of side of things. But there's some industries that you wouldn't know of that I've been exposed to over the last sort of half a dozen years that are starting to revolutionize, the robotics inside their industries. For example, aged care. James, I've been investing in aged care for now nearly 7 years, and
Mhm.
it's one of those last bastions of, probably the most vulnerable in our society. Don't get a lot of love and attention, right? But when you put your parents into there, or you put a loved one into there, or a relative into there, whatever it is, you care about those people and you want them to have the best experience possible. We've had a royal commission. We've had all these different things go on with aged care. Cut a long story short, they also live on the smell of an oily rag. They literally don't have much money. There's wafer thin margins in
Mm.
aged care. How can you put in $100,000 humanoid robot? How could you
Mm.
actually put in something to walk around, serving trays of cakes to the aged care residents? You
Mm.
can't. Yeah, how could you put not yet anyway, wait for a Maximus or something. But basically, how could you have one playing the piano for the golden oldies that they want to hear, right? What they've done, and Japan has been doing this in a big way in the last, even 20 years, where they've gone for the low-hanging fruit. So there's been robotics in aged care running around picking up towels and running around and getting the washing and literally going through the hallways. I know for a fact in the outer suburbs in the city that I live in, there's aged care facilities that you wouldn't think would be high tech, and they've got
Mm.
these robots running around that are sort of Japanese. It's all the SoftBank world, it's all of that. So there's that part of it, and so that's the efficiency of business in the aged care sector. Then there's the social companionship, James,
Mm.
and I might reflect on that later. But what have you seen? What industries have you seen in your travels that might be,
Mm.
beginning to get affected?
Look, I think so. The big one that comes to mind is obviously mining and resources. Coming from a mining family, the autonomous systems have been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and they've always been big consumers of business intelligence and statistical analysis of their business processes. And so those kinds of capabilities lend themselves quite nicely to um, an accelerated journey into AI systems, and especially given they are heavy industry, the robotic elements of that. There's always a risk though, and like a little bit different to aged care. In a heavy industry scenario, like the autonomous systems are made up of tons and tons of steel flying
Mm.
around at the speed of a car. And in the processing plants, for example, the speed at which very heavy things are flying around is, it has to be fast in order to be profitable. All it takes is one thing to go wrong and you've got a full plant breakdown. You've got a $500,000 problem if one thing goes wrong for an hour, and you've got a several $1,000,000 problem if you have to shut down your facility or shut down an aspect of an operation like that. I think that leads to hesitancy about probabilistic models being used to take their own actions in those environments, like these world models or these foundational models for robots, where you give them a natural language instruction and they're expected to go ahead and do it. I don't think that's going to happen for some time until we're able to tackle the auditability, observability, and error correction and the accountability problem of autonomous systems in a tactical sense, not just in a legal and compliance sense.
Sure.
It's going to be really hard to recommend these kinds of systems in heavy industries, which is really interesting because that's where one normally expects expensive hardware technology to live and breathe and thrive in the first breath. It's the military, it's heavy industry, etc. It's kind of like computers more so than it's like the internet, if that makes sense. It's very much a hardware challenge.
Yeah, and the whole question is, are robots going to take our jobs, right? And in a mine, we don't talk about that. We talk about, that's efficiency, right?
Mm.
Because there's not many people in a very vast, expanse trying to extract and do what they're doing. I think where I'm seeing the conversation start to head is around self-driving trucks. For example, in the
Mm.
US, they're going electric. The batteries are going into the diesel trucks. So that's going to be good for, the problems with, rising fuel prices. But also self-driving trucks are starting to come at a rate of knots. They reckon there's a tsunami coming of self-driving trucks. And that's going to put, truckers out of business. That's going to actually put families that rely on that person driving around the States and also Australia. We're very reliant as well on, the whole social fabric of the trucking network around the Australian roads. I don't think that's very far away. I actually think that that's going to be a real test in the next 3 to 5 years as autonomous vehicles get better and better. And as I said, I drove home the other night while I was driven home by a fully autonomous vehicle. And, why isn't it in a truck getting my groceries up from Melbourne or Sydney a lot quicker, more efficiently and not having any accidents on the Hume Highway or the M1. So I think we're not far away.
Is it just boards that are saying not too risky, or is it like cultural
I think it's capital.
challenges?
I think it's CapEx.
Okay,
I actually think it's capital expenditure, and I don't think people have I don't think there's a lot of appetite just now for that. There's appetite to have a dabble. Well, I think we've been using dabbling as a key word on this pod. Having a dabble with the transformation of trucking with electric, batteries. There's a company like Janus, for example, who are a listed company that we've looked after that basically are doing that, and Volvo trucks are doing that as well. But I think we're on that tipping point, James. I actually think, in the consumer space, it's probably further off than people realise. That's my hypothesis. I've got Carl and Carl Jr., Carl the cleaner and Carl Jr. the cleaner, and they're basically $120 Australian Amazon purchased round robots that are the same price, funnily enough, in the UK. They're £55 in the UK. They seem to be the same price everywhere. They do a fantastic job, James. One is upstairs, one is downstairs. Carl Jr. is downstairs. He's got to be promoted to upstairs. But Carl the cleaner comes out at certain times, and for $120, he doesn't mop, but he just picks up the dog hair and the basics in my house. I haven't got a cleaner anymore. I've had a cleaner for 20 years, James. I don't need a cleaner. I just empty Carl's back and away we go. Another few people that I know have Husqvarna, Robotic. They're pretty big lawn mowers, and these are big ones. They can go through big lawns and big sticks and things like that. They're running 24/7 on these properties and things like that, and they're very quiet. So I think we're there with that.
Those particular use cases are kind of well-worn ground, if you'll forgive the pun for a moment. But they're kind of,
I like it.
Yeah, thanks, mate. They're use cases which are definable, and they're somewhat low risk and things like that. And it's like, at which point will Carl Jr. get a promotion to chef? That's.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are waiting for that to happen before they take it more seriously. Would you agree with that?
I would, mate. I would. We're a fair way away from Carl Jr. being superseded by my humanoid robot, doing but look, according to Elon Musk and according to Jensen and all them, it's not far away, right? Yeah. So one thing I want to finish on for this segment before we do a wrap up is just give a shout out to a company called Andromeda, and that's Grace Brown. And she is a Brisbane girl from way back and in Melbourne. And Grace did a mechatronics degree at Melbourne Uni, and she then branched into building social companion robots for the aged care sector. And she did a big raise recently that valued her company at a pretty good amount, and she's gone global now because she's actually managed to 3D print in a cost-effective way these robots that basically blow bubbles. It's called Abby, and it's got very big eyes, but it's got a lot of AI guys. Back to our first comment today, there's that convergence of the AI guys, the ML guys, the mechatronics engineers, the hardware guys, the 3D printer guys. They've all come together to build this company called Andromeda. And they're going global very quickly. And Grace Brown is a perfect example of a great founder. She was on Forbes magazine, recently, and we've been at Sprint. We worked with her a lot and helped her out. And she's a great example of a young, awesome entrepreneur and engineer, and actually rubber hitting the road. And it's a great story.
Yeah, that might be maybe there's an episode in there at some point, like AI in aged care, because like I know that in my local government area, like I'm in Moreton Bay, just north of Brisbane, aged care is a huge employer.
Absolutely.
But they are perpetually under-resourced, and they're all crying out for kind of assistance. And it'd be cool to maybe even have Grace on the podcast at some point and actually talk through some of the challenges that she's seeing out there in the aged care market. What do you reckon, Llew?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely Grace is someone to reach out to, and there's a number of others actually, funnily enough, from Melbourne. There's quite a big industry down there that that, there's a lot of examples in the aged care sector that are doing really well. So yeah, definitely one to put into the future pod. So James, what's been your number one takeaway today? What have you gained and enjoyed from today?
Yeah, I often find myself wearing the black hat in these kinds of scenarios, like being a little bit cynical about the advancements and trying to de-sheen the hype a little bit. But if there's one thing that I didn't emphasize enough, it's that I do believe that this is going to be incredibly revolutionary. What's going to happen over the next 5 or so years with these kinds of systems? The winners are going to be, my key takeaway is that the winners are going to be the ones that overcome these risks and hurdles and, take regulation as a design spec, not as an inconvenience. Because if you can crack the nut of social acceptance of these kinds of systems, you're going to have the market, welcoming you with wide open arms. And I'm a big believer that this is an area where there can be a lot of benefit throughout the economy, not just in a business profitability sense. Yeah. How about you, Llew?
Same with me. You've hit the nail on the head, James. I actually think it's the whole thematic of today's pod is that, let's put robots into places that make a difference for the most vulnerable in society, for example, in aged care. And that's been the critical piece for me, that I think that they're here in certain areas doing that dirty work and things like that, picking up towels and stuff. But really where the rubber's going to hit the road is where we need them for social action, and we need them for people that are, vulnerable in industries that are on wafer thin margins that can't afford either human capital or, there's high turnover and things like that. I think that's where we need to go first. I think we're here in terms of a lot of robotics in manufacturing and in the business sense. But I just think we're a couple of years away, 2 to 5 years away from everybody having their own Maximus and, Elon having your car and your humanoid robot, dominating your home. So I think we're not far away. It's going to be a very interesting space to watch. And I'd even love to have another touch point at the end of the year to see where we're up to with robotics by the end of this year with the whole acceleration of AGI and Nvidia and etc.
Yeah, 100%. This has been a really cool conversation, Llew, and I'm looking forward to what the next steps might be, because I feel like we're on the precipice of something. The AI companies are really leaning into this hardware kind of space at the moment. I think maybe to foster the production of more GPUs, and it might be as simple as that. But hey, I took my black hat off. I'll stop doing that. But next episode, we'll be talking about something that, Llew, you've got an absolute boatload of experience in, and it's the idea of AI searchability and awareness of your business in the AI. What's the word I'm looking for?
It's huge. It's SEO. Basically, it's the search engine optimization. The digital marketing world has now got this thing, James, that's coming at a tsunami to a lot of these agencies and businesses called GEO or AEO. And GEO is generative engine optimization and AEO is answer engine optimization. So we're going to unpack all of that. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And a lot of people ask me about it, and I go, you're just going to have to talk to Llew, because that's not my space. I'll be asking a lot of questions of you, mate, next episode. That's for sure.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks everybody for joining us on Zero Shot today, and that's it for today's session. What we want to do is make sure that you're getting what you expect and need out of these conversations between me and Llew. We don't know everything, and we don't pretend to, but we do like going and learning new stuff. So if you're interested in our view on any particular topics, please send them through to us. Send them through to us on LinkedIn, on YouTube, in the comments. Like and subscribe as always. Leave us a review. Give us your ideas. And either myself or Llew or Yenia, our producer, who is, I can see her right now. She doesn't make herself known on the podcast very often, but she's always there. We'll be responding to you and picking up that information, because we want to demystify this realm for businesses and organizations around the country. That's really important to both me and Llew. What do you reckon, Llew?
Yeah, absolutely. And James, finally, a big thank you to our other sponsor. We've got a new sponsor called Cadent. James, close to your heart. When it comes to embedding high ROI artificial intelligence into complex, high-stake industries, Cadent is leading the charge. They're a team of Brisbane-based AI experts, developers and governance specialists with a mission to align technology to humanity. And they do responsible AI, which is really important. And what I love about James and the guys is they care about the ethics of AI and the governance of AI, which is really great. So yeah, reach out to James and Cadent.
Thanks very much, mate. That they sound like a really good group of people. People should give them a call.
Absolutely, just like Advancer, Team Advancer.
I know,
Awesome.
I know.
Yeah,
The perfect peas in a pod. You could come to both of us and just have everything covered. Isn't it just coincidental?
it's so good, so good. Well, look, everybody, stay sharp, stay sovereign, and we'll see you on the next episode. And of course, thanks to Yenia, the writer, our producer. Cheers.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Leonia. Thanks, everyone.